Hello and welcome to the Gooners podcast. Oh, and it's good to see you. Although I'm only now being able to start to see you through the smoke.
I know maybe only our listeners from the UK will understand this, but it's like tonight, Matthew. What did you call that? Stars in your eyes.
Stars in your eyes.
Stars in your eyes. There's a throwback.
I'm not getting that reference. Welcome to the Gooners podcast, emanating from the home of political peace and quiet, the Washington D.C. area. So not much going on here. Charles Watts is back with us for the first time since before the season. Really appreciate you coming on, especially at this busy time, both Arsenal-wise and lockdown-wise. So thanks for joining us again.
No worries. Good to be back. Looking forward to it.
And Charles, of course, from goal.com, also DAZN, I believe. You do the boxing for them, right? Not the commentary, not the writing, but the actual boxing.
I do not. No, I enjoy my boxing, but that's about as far as it goes.
And of course, your YouTube channel called Arsenal News from the Press Box. And even if none of those things were true, we would still want to have you on for an entire hour just to speak about one thing that that I have become a huge fan of. I'm considering dropping Arsenal just to become a fan of this. I warned you before the show that it's weird because I've had COVID. I've gotten over COVID. My daughter came home from uni and she's been here and we've had a great time. Over the past month, I don't think I'm ashamed to say that's given me the most joy out of anything.
It's the very Ricky Gervais-esque shit.
The end part is fantastic. I mean, I hope you don't mind that I screenshotted that, and it's going to be part of our show introduction from now on. But
no, I'm glad it brings you so much joy because that was kind of the idea of posting it. To be fair, I thought weighed up the factors of me looking like an absolute twat or just giving people a few laughs. And so I'm glad it did. I do love some of the different versions of it. Andy Haas one with the Stone Cold music that kicks in afterwards, right up there.
I was gonna, do some kind of schlocky, have something accidentally fall behind me, and but I don't want these two things to fall behind me, and no. I try to be somewhat original, and you can't beat the original in that case. So last time you were with us, right before the start of the season, we were fresh off of a community shield, charity shield, whatever shield we want to win, and to say that the last 4 months haven't gone quite as planned would be a bit of an understatement. For one thing, at that point, I don't know if we ever told you this, but at that point, I was still dressed up like a gerbil, pretending to be an ITK, giving people, trying to give other ITKs a hard time to preserve your names. But I know we talked about the gerbil last time, but I think I might have kept my mouth shut that it was one of my burner accounts. But just wanted to kind of catch up with you on how the game's gone, how the season's gone for Arsenal. Obviously, it's January, it's silly season, and that's what people are here in the chat. A lot of names in the chat that we don't normally see, and it's great to join us for today. That's all because of you, Charles. So I think what we're going to do today is you're going to break news about the £80 million signing, the transfer fee. We're just waiting on a work permit for Erling Haaland, right? And
he's in the building. He's at London Colney as we speak. 80 million. I'm not sure that'll get his right leg, to be honest.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, maybe for 180 million we can get his right leg, Grealish's left arm.
We just borrowed 150 or whatever it is, so maybe.
Yeah, we ought to probably talk about that, but let's jump into a few things. Woke up this morning to news from Mikel Arteta's press conference. Always dropping the knowledge on that, and we appreciate the live look into what he's talking about. Covered Ozil, Balogun, Saliba, but yesterday I woke up in a pool of sweat as I do, and I grab my phone and I see a ton of farewell messages to Mesut Ozil, and I'm thinking, okay, it's happened. And then the more I keep reading about it, I'm like, there is no resolution here. So you're saying that Arsenal hasn't been contacted by any other clubs, but certainly that they continue to talk to Ozil. You've got to assume that it's Ozil, his managers, his agent, his brand promotional specialist, his wipers and fluffers, and the guy who changes his video games. I mean, they're talking to other teams, right?
Yeah. I mean, they're allowed to talk to whoever they want now about a summer deal or even a January deal to try and set something up. But if a club wants to take him this month, they're going to have to at some point go to Arsenal. And as far as I'm aware, that hasn't happened yet. Arsenal are absolutely open to it. Like you say, they're in regular dialogue with Ozil, and they've even given him a few days off recently. I know he's basically had a season off, but I mean, he's been able to stay away from the training ground to kind of be at home and work on it and try and facilitate something. But he's back now, and yeah, Arsenal have yet to have anyone knocking on the door for him. But that could well happen at some point. We've still got a lot of January to go, and the fact that they are working on it, and that Ozil's agent for the first time raised the possibility of him leaving this month. They've always been so insistent it was going to be the end of the season, always insistent. It was the first time when he did the interview with James Ollie at ESPN that went live yesterday that he raised the possibility of him leaving this month, which I thought was really interesting, because I was always convinced they were adamant that he was going to stay and he would stay. But that was the first time that he raised the possibility, and I think certainly from Arsenal's point of view, that's what they're really working hard on now to get it done, and they're doing everything they can to help Ozil and his team facilitate that. I mean, I think Fenerbahce are probably furthest down the line by the sounds of it in terms of getting something done, but I think it will certainly take Arsenal's help for the initial 6 months before he. Maybe they pay his wages for the first 6 months, then Fenerbahce take it on after that for the length of whatever contract they give him. But, that's something that Arsenal are very, very willing to do. They're not going to look for a transfer fee or anything like that. Obviously, they're happy to just give him away now and just get him off the books or end this saga and move on. I think, honestly, we all need to do it. I can't wait for it to be over. I really can't. And I love Mesut Ozil. I've loved watching him. He's been great at times. I'm not one of these, Ozil fans who thinks he's a legend or something like that. He's not going to go down like that in my book. He's just going to go down as a very good player who I've really enjoyed watching. But it's time for it to come to an end now, and I think everyone wants it. And the fact that Ozil and his people now seem like they feel like they need it as well at this stage of the season, that it can only be a good thing if it does happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think the saga needs to end, and it will be interesting to see who sticks around Arsenal-wise. Like, who's here for Ozil and who's here for Arsenal. I'd like to think most of it is the latter. But, I mean, so you mentioned Fenerbahce. I hear it's down to 4 clubs: Fenerbahce, my local club, DC United, CFR Cluj, and Cowdenbeath FC, which is Cowdenbeath by far my favorite Scottish second division or third division team. I used to follow them religiously on CFAX. But
why?
I'm a little nutty that way. So, Owen, you want to jump in about?
Yeah, no. One of the questions that I've sort of had floating about my head recently, Charles, is that obviously over the last few months, it sort of looked slightly more promising in terms of the fans being reintroduced to the stadiums and sort of restrictions starting to ease and stuff. But I'm sure, as you're aware, as everybody's aware, that the entirety of England have gone back into a sort of strict lockdown, much like we did in March. And do you think in any way that those sort of rigid measures coming back in for the foreseeable future, do you think that could impact our spend or the possible transfer kitty that we have going into the January window? I think
it definitely will, but I'm not. I don't think Arsenal are planning to spend much anyway in January. It's always been looking towards the summer for them to do their business. If something could happen in January, then they will try and do it, but it's going to be very, very difficult. I mean, the fact that the club have taken out £120 million loan today from the Bank of England speaks for itself. The money's basically run out. They've got all their cash reserves have gone. It's run out. They're having to borrow money to help ease this cash flow crisis that they've got, and you're just not going to be going and spending 50, 60, 70 million pounds at this stage of the season. It's going to be incredibly difficult to do that. Maybe they'll get a loan in, but unless Stan Kroenke suddenly dips his hand into his pocket and throws 50 million on the table for them to go out and try and get someone in January, I just can't see it happening. It's going to be a really, it's good, not just at Arsenal, everywhere. And I don't see many people spending money at the moment at all, given the situation. And like you said, the fact that they were hoping at this stage of the season, maybe fans would start coming back in and that revenue would start coming back in. But it's not the case. And it doesn't look like it's going to happen for a long, long time, potentially the season. And I think it's 24% of Arsenal's annual revenue is just match day revenue. And that shows how much they're losing through that.
It was 100 mil a game. And that's just practically gone. So, but we do make part of that back by not having the original Gunnersaurus there at his wage. Graham brings up a great point, which is relevant to what we're talking about now. And I would add to this, which is, he says, how can Arsenal justify buying any player in the transfer window when they've applied to the government for a loan from the taxpayer, which is news that just broke in the last few hours. To me, my supplement to that question would be, it's not that the owner is skint. I know he's highly leveraged with his stadium here in LA and stuff, but I mean, he would appear to be able to be his own bank more easily than have to borrow from the UK under their scheme. I mean, what am I missing there on the way that the money flow works? Because it seems odd.
Well, it's a self-sustainable model, isn't it? Stan Kroenke may be the owner, but he doesn't put the money in. He's never put any money in. And I think Arsenal borrowing.
Couldn't he loan at a lower interest rate though?
I think the Bank of England would probably be a cheaper interest rate with this scheme. I think you're looking at about 0.5%, something like that. I bet Kroenke would probably charge more than that. And Arsenal say he's given us the money to refinance the stadium debt and everything like that, which he has. That's true, but it's not. He hasn't taken that debt on. He's just given it to Arsenal, and Arsenal now, instead of paying the banks and whoever they had to pay before, they're paying Stan Kroenke at whatever interest rate we don't know because it's never emerged. And it's just how it works. He's not an owner who puts his own money in. Arsenal have always been a club who operate to a self-sustainable model, and that is still the case. And all the talk of Kroenke putting money in, it's just not going to happen. It's never happened, and it won't happen. I cannot see it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and for me, the final stretch. I mean, Owen, you know this. Andy knows this. All the users know this. I mean, I thought, Ozil's been a great influence around the club behind the scenes. I think he's been great on the training pitch the last couple of years. You know that about me. But that tweet about how Emile Smith Rowe in the number 10 role was a really good idea. It was just that. I mean, that passive-aggressive tweet was the last straw. I mean, I was ready to give him an extension, plug him back until that tweet. I mean, there's nothing that's not passive aggressive about that, is there? I mean, you don't have to answer that, Charles, but that just seemed that. I mean, you could interpret his tweets in a few different ways, but now he's just getting snarky.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, and to be fair, it's not his tweets anyway. It's his management team's tweets. He's not sitting there on his phone watching it and tweeting it.
You really think so? I mean, they're in charge of his brand to that extent. Where
100%. Well, I know it.
Okay.
Footballers rarely tweet, and there'll be the occasional one where they'll pick up the phone and probably have to get permission from someone else just to tweet on their own account. But mainly, it's not them doing it. It's certainly not Mesut Ozil at that level. It's just not. That's what they pay people to do it for them. And there's no way you're sitting there talking about Emile Smith Rowe. And like the ones with Piers Morgan, it's just never Mesut Ozil sitting there doing that. It's someone else doing it. It's just the way it is. And it's not. I'm not having to go at Ozil from that. All footballers do it. And
the reason Owen doesn't have the password to our Twitter account is because I don't want him to find out that we have a management team that does our tweets.
You need one. A big
that is true. Definitely need one. So this transfer window is really more about clearing out players, I think, than it is about bringing them in, like you talked about. And but there is, I don't want to kind of be redundant to the last question and still ask about this, but there's just tons of speculation out there about a loan or a purchase for a creative midfielder, a guy who probably end up stunting Emile Smith Rowe's progress. Here's a partial list of players we've been linked with: Julian Draxler, Julian Brandt, Julian Lennon, Julian Assange, Emi Buendia, Emi Martinez, Eminem, Yves Bissouma, Yves Saint Laurent, Yves, from like FC Garden of Eden. Some of these we can just rubbish right off the top, right?
Yeah, I'm not expecting any of those to arrive during this during this month. Anyway, they do like Emi Buendia. That's been something that's been ongoing for a long time. The previous scouting team, Francis Cagao and everyone like that, they were big fans of Buendia. He's been on the list that they've submitted to the club for a couple of years, and they've watched him extensively. And there is sort of contact with representatives, and they get on well with Edu and Arsenal. They're the same agency that had Emi Martinez and Alexis as well, so they know them well. But you're just not going to get him out of Norwich at this point, especially with Arsenal can't afford it. And he's got a long-term contract to 2024. They're going to go up to the Premier League this season. You would think if they keep Buendia, if they lose him, they could end up losing 100 million, because that's what Premier League promotions were. They're not going to accept something like 15, 20 million that I've seen people talk about.
You always think you can get players that drop into the Championship, for such a steal. But then if you don't get them, I guess, right when they drop,
not now,
who's your pathway back, unless he just drops his way out of the club.
They're in such a strong bargaining position, Norwich. Why would we sell? Why would we sell halfway through the season and risk Premier League promotion and all the money that would bring? So I just can't see it happening.
Maybe if they were mid-table or lower half,
you have more of a chance.
But they're not.
Yeah, exactly. So potentially in the summer, that's one, because they do like him. They have followed him for a long time. But I can't see that happening. Isco at Madrid, there was interest in Isco, potentially still is. I've heard there's reports in Spain saying Arsenal sort of moved on from that, and that might be the case, but there was definitely some sort of interest in that. It's not a deal that I would like, I have to say. What's the point in bringing someone in on that sort of money just for a short-term loan? It'll probably take a month to acclimatise. It's just Denis Suarez all over again, but a bigger name and more expensive. It's just not for me.
I was all about Isco like in 2012.
Exactly, and he's scored 4 goals and set up 4 in the league in the last 3 seasons, I think, as well. It's not like you're getting him at the top of his form. So no, and again, I'd just much rather play Emil Smith-Rowe between now and the end of the season than bring in someone that you're just going to spend money on and then send back to Madrid in a few months' time. So I do think that the whole Smith-Rowe emergence has maybe lessened the need for it. I mean, I've been calling for Smith-Rowe to get a run for a long time. I really, really like him. He's got all the attributes Arsenal need, and he's showing it now. You are putting a lot of pressure on a young kid's shoulder, and a young kid who's had injury problems as well. So maybe he does need a little bit of help, which is kind of why I thought maybe they'd keep Ozil, and if they could free up space in the squad, they'd just bring him back in and get him through to the end of the season with Smith-Rowe. But obviously it looks like that's not going to be the case. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they pull something out of the bag and do some sort of loan deal. But right now I couldn't say who it's going to be or have any real sort of strong information on who exactly they're going to go after.
In terms of a figure for Brandt, I think on transfer market is market value is somewhere in the region of 30 to 35 million. But I've seen figures, and this could be absolute nonsense, being bummed about of around 22 to 24 million. In terms of a figure for a player like Brandt, what do you think would be the realistic sort of figure that we'll be looking at?
I think you're probably looking at 30 million for me. I mean, he has not had the greatest of time at Dortmund. You look at Brandt, and again, this is me just presuming, I don't have information on this, but you kind of look at him, I don't think he was in the squad last weekend for Dortmund, and he's not really set the place alight there. You wonder if there's a potential for a loan later on in the window there. If he's not getting in the squad for Dortmund, could they maybe do a loan with some sort of option to buy, maybe to tempt Dortmund into doing that? It could be something that Arsenal look at. That would be the kind of thing I could imagine happening, but I don't know it's going to. And I like Brandt. I think he's a decent player. He's obviously not been fantastic at Dortmund, but you only have to go back a season and suddenly go back a season, and he was fantastic in the Bundesliga before his move to Dortmund. So that's maybe the sort. I'd much rather something like that happening than an Isco, put it that way.
See, in terms of these players, Charles, we listed there Buendia, Isco, Brandt. Obviously, under Sven Mislintat, we were very sort of analytical data based in terms of the players that we were targeting, and then under Raul, we were very agent based, obviously. But with this pairing between Mikel Arteta and Edu, are you aware of what sort of approach they're taking to identify these transfer targets?
It's more statistical based. I mean, that's what Edu certainly wants us to believe. Anyway, we all know he does have his agent mates that have potentially been a little bit too close to Arsenal. Whether they were more because of Raul, and Arsenal moved away from that. That's what Arsenal certainly want us to believe. And when we sat down and talked to Eddie at the start of the window, just after he sacked the whole scouting team, he said the reason for that was because he wanted it to be much more analytical, and he wanted it all to be done in office at Colney with everyone around each other and not all over place in Europe, which I don't agree with. I think it's a bit mad, but he's a director of football. That's what he's going to do. But that's certainly what they want us to know now. Is it's very much an analytical scouting network, and that's how Eddie wants to build it, because he wants to build it by bringing other people in. He hasn't really started doing that yet, and he will do that over the next year, 2 years or so. But that's the route he says he wants to go down.
One of the guys that we heard about in the press conference this morning, and I've been talking about him nonstop, both on and off the pod for the last 2 months, is my second favorite Arsenal player of all time. I mean, there's David Rocastle, and then there's Fuller and Ballon D'Balogun. No one in between. He scores every 8 minutes he's on the pitch. Arteta says he wants to stay, meaning Balogun. The club wants him to stay, but he's not sure about the agent. I know this is naive, but doesn't the agent work for him instead of the other way around? I mean,
you would think.
Now we're hearing about Stuttgart, and we're hearing from James and from David Ornstein about a foreign club, which is speculated to be Stuttgart. I mean, this guy's the future. I believe the children are the future.
It's going to be a blow if they lose him, and it looks like they are going to lose him. I thought it was interesting, Arteta's little dig today. You'd think if they're in really close negotiations that you wouldn't be doing something like that and publicly calling out the agent. You'd want to keep him on side. So I thought as soon as he said that, you think, oh, that doesn't sound good at all. And then obviously James and David ran the story on the Athletic, saying he was very, very close to signing a pre-contract agreement.
Does the agent call those guys as soon as that comment is made and say, I want you to put out a story in the next hour?
You'll have to ask James and David that. I wouldn't want to say. But that's how agents work a lot of the time. But yeah, I wouldn't want to say on that.
James, is that what happened? Said yes.
But yeah, it's a weird one, because it does look like you see a lot of young kids coming through, and there's obviously a lot of hype about him all the time. It's just the way of the world of football. But he does look like he's got something about him, Balogun. When you see him, you think, yeah, you are pretty special. I watched him. I went last summer to Arsenal versus Barnet. It was an under-23s team against Barnet first team, just pre-season friendly. And I went down just to watch it. And he scored a hat-trick in like 8 minutes, Balogun. And it was like the most spectacular hat-trick. Like all of the goals were just outrageously good. It was the first time I'd watched him in the flesh. And I said, yeah, you are pretty special. And then obviously he's done what he's done in the first team when he's got his chances. So
over 90 minutes, he's easily bagging 12, 13 goals a game.
Yeah, exactly. It does feel like one when you're going to be that you're just like, oh no, are we going to have to watch? Kind of go way back when Arsenal lost Andy Cole, way back when. And he also scored so many goals coming through in the reserves back then in the combination league. And I remember just when I started going to Arsenal, and you get the programme as a junior gunner, you'd look at the reserves
my God.
section, and he'd be scoring all the time. And then he went Bristol City, and then Newcastle and United. And
a few years before him, I think I was in the same position. I would look at the program, and it was Kevin Campbell,
yeah.
and finally, before I had to move back home, I finally got to see a half season of his first team debut. I felt like invested in him.
But even to quote Kevin Campbell here, and this is something I've said before, Kevin said on the Highbury squad a couple of weeks ago, he says, why should the club commit to a player who isn't willing to commit to the club? He's demanding playing time, and let's face it, this is a guy who's very unproven. We've seen with the likes of Reece Nelson, Emile Smith-Rowe, like many others from many other clubs, that they go out and they prove themselves on loan. And I just wonder because look, at the end of the day, the agent works for the player. And if the player severely wanted to sign for the club, to sign a new deal, I'm sure the agent would most likely get behind that. I just wonder, is the player being a little too pushy when it comes to this here? Is there an aspect that he isn't willing to do the hard graft that maybe we've seen some others do to prove himself?
I think there probably is there is a bit of that in it. But when you look at Balogun, he's 19. He's older than Saka and people like that, so he hasn't really had a sniff, really. But I think you also have to take it into context that contract talks broke down a long time ago, and Arsenal had basically told him you can leave, at that point, because they thought they'd offered him a very good deal. It had a lot of incentives built into it, and that's what they tend to do with their youngsters now. And that was thrown back at them by Balogun and his agents. They didn't like that at all. They thought they wanted much more money, and Arsenal at that point said, "Okay, fine, we're not going to bend over backwards for you. You can go, and we'll accept it. We'll try and sell you in the summer." They didn't sell him, didn't get any sort of decent bid that would attempt him. And it was after that they started opening contract talks again. I think when you're in that position, when you've already, said to him, "Okay, you can go," you're already opening up again. You're in a bad bargaining position already, because you've already annoyed everyone. There's obviously not the greatest relationship there, certainly with the club and agents, and it's difficult. I mean, the agent is the same agent who represents Bukayo and Eddie, so he's well known to the club. It's not like it's someone they've never dealt with before. So they do know who he is, but I think you're always
got to be careful what you say to that guy then if he's Bukayo Saka's agent.
That's exactly it. It limits sort of the cloak and daggers that you can normally pull with agents, I suppose, that you don't want to tarnish any future relationships when it comes to the likes of Bukayo Saka. But Charles, even we've covered one of the hot topics with my first question to you, which was COVID, and now I'm going to ask you about everyone's second favourite subject, which is Brexit. So obviously, look, with Brexit coming into play now, the landscape has very much changed in terms of the importation of overseas players to England. But something that I've been considering is that are Arsenal in a good position now to sort of exploit these circumstances in terms of maybe domestically shifting on some of our youth players? I mean, you look at somebody like a Joe Willock, Reece Nelson, Eddie Nketiah, these types of players. Are these players that will be in a more high demand now from the likes of championship teams or lower Premier League teams because they're much more accessible than the foreign talent at the minute?
I'd say probably. I was speaking to someone at Arsenal longer, actually, who's at the academy there, and I was talking about the new rules and how it's all going to affect Arsenal, and he saw it as something that could be a good thing for the club. He said he wasn't scared by it, because I thought Arsenal might be panicking a little bit about what it's all going to mean, but he viewed it as something that they could take advantage of. And they've got very good in terms of incomings as well. They've got such a good scouting network around England now that's been built up, and they've already benefited from that. I mean, Hayden's just in a constant churn of talent at the moment, and that's only going to continue. But yeah, I mean, in terms of outgoings as well, I think they could certainly benefit from it, like you said. And you look at some of those players, and I think Joe's done well at times. I think Eddie's done well at times, but I'm still not convinced they're sort of long-term Arsenal players. I think they're people you could potentially benefit. You could, sell for a decent profit at some point down the line. Kind of looking what you did with Iwobi, and I think Arsenal need to do more of that. I think as well. They need to bring in decent amount of money for these young players that aren't quite to Arsenal's standard. And
that's what's so frustrating about the Balogun thing is, look, I can accept that not every incredible young academy person is going to come through the academy and be the next, Ian Wright. I'm not saying Ian Wright came through our academy. I know that he didn't, but I'm just, you can't have that all the time. But when we keep losing them for nothing, it's aggravating. And the Brexit thing, it feels like financial fair play to me in a sense, where Arsenal are salivating over it, saying this is going to level the playing field and allow us to actually use our savviness instead of it having it just be about who has the biggest stick to wave around. And we all know how that worked with FFP. So you think Brexit's going to be any different than that type of situation?
Oh, yeah, who knows? Brexit's the whole thing's still totally up in the air. I don't know. I can't really see how it's going to go over the next year or 2 years in this country, and how it's going to affect any business. Really, the whole thing's such a mess. But in terms of the young talent and losing them, I do agree. But I also think so many of the young talent that we think are going to go on and be absolutely fantastic never really go on to be absolutely fantastic. And I remember when Amici was going, that was like the absolute meltdown. People, oh no, we're losing. He's the biggest talent we've had in years. And what's Amici done since he's gone? And
I have a half-built Wellington Silva statue in my house that I never finished off, and I was going to finish it off with Balogun, but I'm thinking now it's going to end up being Muller.
But is that a case of stagnation, that we don't make decisions quick enough? You look at the likes of, maybe, I know they're a bad example because they're so well run nowadays, but even 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, Liverpool were fantastic at taking people through Melwood and then shifting them on quite early. Maybe a lot of their names you don't hear because they never really made a big impact in the first team. But I even look at the likes of Suso, players like that who they had within their academy system, and then they moved on quite early, because the truth is that there is only a limited amount of a limited amount of spaces to sort of give players the chance to progress. And I just wonder now whether it's sort of down to the point where the club are going to have to commit to either Eddie Nketiah or Balogun. That seems sort of, it looks like to me like there's a bit of a dilemma which avenue they want to go down.
Yeah, I think so. And I think if for I can understand Balogun's point of view, because he's got in front of him, you've got Lacazette, obviously Aubameyang, Eddie, Martinelli. You know, he's not a 17-year-old kid; he's a 19-year-old kid. So that doesn't make a little bit of a difference. He'll be looking around seeing players his age making a grade in the first team already, and he's got, you know, some world-class players in front of him and some huge young talents, especially Martinelli in front of him as well. Mm-hmm. So is he really going to get the opportunity? So I can understand him and his agents perhaps looking elsewhere, and I can understand Arsenal not wanting to break the bank when they've already got some young talents coming through in that position as well. So I think it's just one of these scenarios where it's going to be frustrating, and we're all going to sit here with our fingers crossed that it's not going to come back to bite us in years come by, and suddenly we're going to have a 25-goal Premier League striker on our hands somewhere else.
It's just Canterbury syndrome, innit? It's you can't live your life fearing of what they might become. But Mike, we're going to have to fight over how are we dividing this £5 up.
Well, each of us will get 30p after YouTube takes their share, which is what Giannis is talking about. First, and I'm glad you left this up, because Giannis, I love you, guy. He's up until all hours in the night watching some of our favorite podcasts that go in the evening. Very loyal to us. Appreciate that. He says, I know that you hate super chats. It's only when we're doing the cancer charity, the Gooners versus Cancer charity, that I tell people, you know, if you're going to donate, we appreciate any donation you have, but do it through our website rather than through super chats. But otherwise, you know, it's a real sign of appreciation, and we appreciate it. So, and obviously Giannis is a big fan of yours, Charles. He's watched every single video that you've made. And he didn't say he's watched every single YouTube video. He just says he's watched every video you've made since you started your YouTube channel. So I hope that the two are connected. A lot of people in the chat who I'm seeing for the first time are pointing out how much of a dope I am, and believe me, it's. Oh, and is it an act?
No, not at all. In fact, I'd say that you tone it down a lot.
I tried.
Stephen, this makes it even worse.
Yes, well, we have a special guest joining us this afternoon.
Hello, everyone.
Oh,
hi, Adi.
Hello. Sorry to interrupt. Mike was texting me saying Charles is carrying us. Owen is just a tit. Can you jump on and save the podcast again? So I thought, okay.
Yes, it's absolutely necessary. Andy making thank you, Sam. So getting a little bit off the rails here, but let's get back to it. I want to make sure that we have enough time for user questions, because obviously the chat's been going wild, and we appreciate all the people in there. And you know, we can't just spend the last portion of the podcast talking about Nikolai Muller, as much as I'd like to. So let's go back and go to a few. First of all, thank you, Sam. I appreciate that. Are those American dollars or Australian? We need to know.
Does America have currency right now in its current state?
Yeah, I think our currency is being significantly devalued in the last 24 hours. So let's go back to some questions here. We have one from Jim. Good point when we're talking about all the ins and outs here. Homegrown player issues. Where do we stand on that, Charles, at the moment?
Not great. Not great. That's they need to get at least a couple more players out if they want to bring players in. Really, the issue, there were two over, obviously in the summer, with Mesut and Socrates not making it. They've got rid of Kolasinac, so that frees up one space. But they need to get more homegrown players in. I think that the biggest mistake they made in the summer was Runarsson and the goalkeeper issue. Getting rid of Emi, I can understand that because they had to make a decision, but not signing a homegrown goalkeeper and taking up one of your quota on a foreign keeper who clearly is not up to the standards. That's been a real problem. I think they made a real error there.
He started off well. I mean, I think he saved a couple of saves.
But surely persisting with Matt Macy was the obvious sort of alternative to that. No homegrown, you're not going over the homegrown quota, and you're using a player who's been stagnant for
Absolutely.
years.
But I think the issue was
I didn't even think about that.
They thought Macy was going to leave in the summer as well. It was pretty much guaranteed he was going to go. Then it didn't happen, and so
would that be on loan or a full-time move?
I think that he was going to leave permanently in the summer. It didn't happen. He's gone now, obviously, on loan to Hibs, and he's out of contract at the end of the season, so he's off anyway. But I think the goalkeeper issue was that they really messed up with that, and they're going to have to sort that out. If I was Arsenal, honestly, I would be prioritising this window, bringing in a goalkeeper, finding a loan, doing something with a goalkeeper. Because if something happens to Leno, God forbid, and I don't want to dig out Richardson here, but
is he really that bad? I mean,
from what I've seen, if what happened last season happened to Leno, and you went the last 3 months of the season with Richardson as your number one in the Premier League, I dread to think what would happen. He's not.
I'd rather have Dejan Iliev if he's still around than
well, I know that Andy will love this, but there's a really good goalkeeper at Aston Villa. So
maybe he's available on a £60 million.
Maybe we could Manchester United and pay him, getting back for really, really expensive fee.
From Mass Gunner, and speaking of the gerbil and Raul and their love affair. Was the rumor about Raul getting commission if Saliba played a certain number of games true? I mean, will we ever know this? But
in the fear of libeling myself, I'm not going to answer that question.
I was going to say yes or no answer, or just you can log off if that's how you would prefer to handle it. But we don't want that. So, what else do we have here? Andy, anything you want to ask Charles since you popped in?
Oh, he's muted himself.
He's not on the podcast for 3 weeks, and then he comes on and we can't hear him at all.
Do we know? You may have talked about it already. But, what are we thinking of the Ozil rumors in January? His exit to Fenerbahce.
We talked about it earlier, and I think it's looking certainly more likely than it ever has done. It's not anywhere close to being down the line yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does happen. Arsenal are still waiting for a contact, but they're more than willing to make it happen. I think for the first time in this whole saga, there is a willingness on both sides for something to happen in the next few weeks. So it's looking more positive than it has done before.
Nice.
Well, what about that one, Charles, from Matthew de Souza? Cheers, Mike. Thank you.
Sorry. Yep. Too many people.
Right. Don't worry about it. You're sacked. Get off. The Torreira one, Charles. There was rumours that Atleti that we were going to take him back in January. Obviously, that sounds like it's probably nonsense. But in terms of where the club stand with Luca Torreira, do you think that he'll return to the club, or do you think he'll likely be shifted on at the end of the season?
Oh, I think he'll be shifted on. He'll be a player they're desperate to get rid of. It hasn't. He hasn't settled. He won't want to come back really either. He'll want to move on. It's a real shame it's not happened for him at Atletico, because I thought that was a deal that was going to work really, really well. I don't know if they were just pissed off with the whole party thing, or if he's just not done it since he's gone over there. But he's barely got any game time, and then they brought in Kondogbia as well.
Is it possible they're devaluing him? I mean, I've seen. Are they just basically letting him rot to get us back for Partey?
I mean, who knows? They might be that spiteful, but it's certainly not worked out as I think we all hoped it was. Because although there wasn't an obligation to buy or anything like that, including it, you kind of figured he'd go there, do really well, and because he thought he would, because he fitted in, he just felt like a Simeone type player. Do really well, and then his value would be much higher than it would be if he'd have just stayed and knocked around playing a few games for Arsenal for a season. But now his value is going to be plummeted. So maybe they'll bring him back in January. They'll look, because there will be a break clause in that. I'm sure they will. I don't know if certain, but most loans there is a sort of 1 week period in January where the club can break it and bring him back, and they might well look to like they did with Eddie when he was at Leeds. And look to shift him on again somewhere else in January, where he's actually going to go and play between now and the end of the season, just to try and protect his value, because he kind of feel like they need to.
I love the questions about Dybala. There are certain players that will just never, the rumors will never die. He's not quite in the Jan Mavila category yet, Dybala, and I'm certainly not placing him in the same category from a skill standpoint, but RP Coconuts 7, that's his real name, by the way, thinks you're the GOAT. and I don't think there's too many people in the chat that would argue with that. Owen, do you have any questions about? Oh, one of the people you talked about this morning was Omar Rekic. Speaking of incomings, not necessarily the kind that's going to change our fortunes this season, but 19-year-old defender. He's in Hertha Berlin's B team. Do we worry that he might end up running into Guendouzi on the training ground one day and scupper the whole thing?
Well, he's not going to be on the senior training ground. He's going to link up with the under-23s. He kind of continues this theme of players that Arsenal brought in the last 6 months or so in the academy. They've sent out a whole host of their players on loan, which is they've sort of moved down a different route with how they're looking to develop their players and sent out miles more than they normally do on loan, especially to the lower leagues in England. So they needed to fill spaces basically, and have gone out on a big shopping spree around Europe before the Brexit rules come in, and brought a host in. Like you talked about Muller and Rekic, and there was plenty more as well. And he's the latest one. It was one they had set up in the summer, and it didn't quite go through, but it was agreed it would happen in January anyway. And he's been over here for a few weeks now, and just waiting for confirmation. He's been training with the team, and he's in, but it's with the 23s. It's not one for the senior squad.
Mm-hmm. That about Guendouzi as well, I think, when we bought him. But question from Sam. Charles, do you enjoy the part of your job where you query Arteta, aka like this morning? Do you pull any of your questions from what you see from other fans? God, I hope.
What do you mean? Do you pull it? I'm not sure I understand.
Like when you get the opportunity to ask Arteta a question, is it a homegrown question, or do you go to Twitter and look at what people are asking and then ask him a question?
Right. No, it's normally for me. But to be fair, I am a fan, so I tend to have the same questions that a lot of fans have and want to know the answer to. And
that was actually asked earlier and not put on the screen. Are you a fan of Arsenal? And or is it a paid position only?
God, I've season ticket. I've still got a season ticket, but I've season ticket holder for 30 years now. First season was the 88-89 title win. It was my first season going with my dad, who's born on Hornsey Road in Holloway, just basically next door to the Emirates. And I've been an Arsenal fan forever. So,
no, you don't pull questions. Was it actually a few weeks back that you persisted with one that much that Arteta got a little bit snappy?
He did. There was a weird one because it wasn't even that hard. It wasn't even that tough a question. I think he got annoyed. It was James Benj asked the first one, and he didn't really answer it. So, and I was really interested in the actual he said yes, but didn't expand on it. And I actually wanted to just know why he felt it was, what was it? It was after one of the Europa League games when they played really well, scored a lot of goals, and played. It was the crosses, wasn't it? It was when he was getting annoyed about the questions about crosses, and I just sort of pushed him on it, and then it all went weird because I think he was looking at a screen with other journalists laughing or something at his response, and he clearly got irked by it, and it was all a bit of a mess.
Is it easier when that happens over Zoom than if you're sitting in the media room and you just have to sit there because Andy can tell you that if you ask a stupid question or not stupid, but if you ask a question they don't like, or even worse if if your phone alarm goes off, sitting on the dais and have to walk up there and sheepishly take it away, you could be sweating for the rest of the thing, and it's easier to sweat off on camera than it is in person. But would that have gone down differently if you were in person? Or
I think what made it even worse was the fact it was on Zoom though, because I didn't actually hear what he said, and then you're kind of talking over him because there was a bit of a delay because they were abroad as well, and it all just got really messy because I didn't hear what he said, and then I asked him again, and it annoyed him even more, I think, because I hadn't heard him. I think if it was actually in person, it wouldn't quite have gone down as badly as that, but it did. Yeah, it wasn't the prettiest of press conferences.
Giannis the stalker is asking, how is the home?
I can see this going terrible is how it's going. I'm dreading it. The next 2 months are going to go on it's just going to be the longest 2 months. It was bad enough in March for the first lockdown when there's only one of them, but now both of them are at school. And trying to homeschool a 4 and a 6-year-old while balancing your job as well. It's going to be a long couple of months. The little hair that I've got left on his head is going to be gone, trust me, in a couple of months.
I shaved it because I wanted it. I needed to be in control of it. Pony Boy, who's making a return from the great movie. What was it? What was that movie from the 80s with Matt Dillon, and the outsiders. Ponyboy's back, and he's asking if the Basuma rumors are true.
I don't know. I haven't heard anything on him myself. He's a good player. Thought he was great the other day. So it'd be quite handy if it was.
You mean against us?
But I don't know, yeah. But yeah, it'd be a lot of money. All of them would. Now you're sort of looking at those sort of players. Lamptey as well was linked as a possible Bellerin replacement. John Cross wrote the story there, and you kind of think that they're going to be so expensive. And when you look at the financial picture that Arsenal are in at the moment, all those sort of deals are going to be really difficult. So I think you're going to be leaning on the academy boys an awful lot recently, with sort of one kind of similar to what we saw last summer, maybe one star signing as a window, a party type signing, that sort of money, and then the rest of them sort of cheaper deals and looking at the academy. So, but in terms of Basuma, I just don't know. It's not one that I've heard of myself.
Can I ask a question from because I'm a long time listener, first time caller.
Owen from Ireland is from Newry has a question for us.
Well, yeah, look, you two boys are on here acting the victims. You are on here acting the victims, Andy and Mike, about the troubles over in America. You're preaching to the wrong fucking boy, right? If you're talking to somebody about all that kind of stuff, a lad from the north of Ireland isn't the boy to be looking sympathy from. But anyway, back to my question.
I don't remember asking for your sympathy, but let's go on with this premise.
Okay. Charles, two players that sort of negotiations or a lack of negotiations, Rob Holding and Mohamed El-Neni. Is there any updates on their contract situation? I suppose El-Neni is probably the more likely. You could see maybe leaving the club at the end of the season.
Yeah, I would say so. I think Holding will stay. I think he'll sign a new contract. Mikel really, really likes him, and he thinks he's come on an awful lot in the last year or so. And he has, definitely, because it's been a difficult year for Holding. When you go back to before the injury, he was looking like Arsenal's best defender, and he came back and he looked way off the pace. Had to adjust to a new manager as well, so it was difficult for him, and he struggled early on. I think a lot of people wrote him off, but I think certainly since even like just the last couple of months, he's beginning to look like he's getting back to what he was pre-injury, and I think he's done really well. I think him and Mari have been a great partnership recently. I think they've played really nicely alongside each other and look pretty promising. It'll be interesting to see who makes way now that Gabriel is back or is about to be back. But yeah, I think Holding will sign.
Doesn't it almost have to be Mari, given the footedness of them?
You would say so. That whole left-sided thing is a bit of an issue.
Holding's career path is basically it's like this injury. It's like
he really seems to be. There's some central defenders are very weird. I think they're a bit different than any other position on the pitch, because I think that, especially stylistically, Rob Holding fits the mold of one of those center halves that really only get better later on in their career, because their game is, he's not completely gifted with pace. He's not overly physical. He's, and a lot of his game relies on reading the game and positional awareness. So I think that really Rob Holding is someone that we can only see get steadily better season by season, and you'll really only see sort of reap the rewards of Rob Holding, if you'd like, when he's in that sort of 28, 29 age, once he's really learned his craft.
Yeah, I think you'd be mad to get rid of Rob Holding. I don't understand. He's got a little bit of flack fairly well, certainly in the last year, and I don't really get that. I don't think he's done much wrong at all, apart from get injured. I think when he first arrived, if you go back to those early days, in the semi-final performance against Man City, the final performance against Chelsea way back in his first season, he was brilliant, just coming straight out of Bolton. And then he was really good before the injury as well. And it's just the injuries that have really slowed him down. So I think you certainly keep hold of Rob Holding, you get him to sign a new deal. I think the fact that Saliba hasn't been playing has kind of worked against Rob Holding, because obviously a lot of people view Saliba as the next Maldini, and
maybe
the fact he's not been playing has frustrated a lot of people, and Holding has maybe got a little bit of flack because of that. But I think he's a good player. I think you keep him and get him to sign a new deal. In terms of El-Neni, I think El-Neni will go. He's had a little bit of a renaissance that none of us expected, really, because I think we all thought he was going to go last summer. He didn't. He stayed. And he's had a decent enough season, but I still think he's pretty average. I think you move El-Neni on if you can, you get a decent bit of money for him, and you move on and you improve, because you need better than Elneny if you want to really sort of move up and challenge the big boys in the Premier League.
He needs to be part of that churn, where we got him for 5. We got years out of him plugging in a gap when we needed him. He's certainly had a renaissance. And if you can get more money than we paid for him 4 years ago, 5 years ago, whenever it was, he's done a job. I mean, we're not going to get to the top of the Premier League churning players like that dozens and dozens of times. We got to do some promising youngsters. Might have to sell a Guendouzi, or would have been nice to have sold a Balogun or something like that. But yeah, I mean, you're a big Elneny guy.
Well, no, I just think there's something to say for guys like Elneny who don't command a huge wage. They don't demand to play every week. I mean, he's a squad player. He's the kind of player that you can plug in Europa League matches, League Cup matches. Every once in a while, he comes in the league and does his thing, like against Manchester United, right? But if you were to plug him in against West Brom or one of the bottom half of the table, like our rivals right now, we typically would think like, yeah, he's a comfortable person to be in that role. And I just think there's something to say for players like him who respect being at a big club that don't demand to play every minute of every match, right? And
he could do a good bit, last 10 or 15 minutes protecting a 1-0 lead
totally
United, which we've seen.
Yeah, he seems like he's a good lock. Like he's good for the dressing room. He's good for the training ground. So, like I those are the type of players that when you look at squads like City and United, they have those players that just pop in and they do their thing, and they're not grandiose players, right?
The only thing you would say is that it would go against exactly what Arsenal have been trying to build in recent years, and it's learning from the mistakes and starting to sort of gain resale value on their players. And Mohamed Elneny is now 27, 28, and around that age. I think if you give him a contract, people are talking about giving him a 1-year extension. No player signs a 1-year extension at that age. You're talking maybe 3 years, and then that value's gone. There is no resale value. So like Mike was saying, he's somebody that you buy in for 5 million, and even if it is a 7.5 million, 10 million pound sale, it's still profit. If you
trust this board to actually get a player better than Elneny for that amount of money, like
I think they've got one in Ainsley Maitland-Niles. I'd much rather see Ainsley, I think, playing that central midfield role. If you're going to get 10, 12 million pounds for Elneny now, which I do think. Like I said, this is the time to sell Elneny. He's done a decent job for us. And this season, fair play to him. He's come in and done far better than I expected him to do this season. But I do feel this is the time. You're either going to have to give him a new contract, which will push him into his 30s, or you're going to have to sell at this point and get yourself a little bit of return on what you spent on him. So I think it's the right time to do that, and then that will hopefully free up space for if they don't want to bring in another midfielder on decent wages. It's not that you've already got Ainsley there who can step up and certainly fill in that role if Ainsley stays, because I think that's up at the air at the moment as well.
I hope so. One final question, because you've been very generous with your time, and if you've just joined in the last 20 or 30 minutes or so, I kind of noticed a bit of a spike in the viewers in the last 20 minutes or so. You can go back and watch the first half. Charles has been brilliant. I can't say the same for Owen.
It's because Andy's come in. That's when I realized the views have shot up.
That's true. Everyone found out that he was back. What is everyone's
That's the nicest thing you've ever said.
Sam's favorite Arsenal player of all time, Bergkamp. I've already said that it's basically a tie between Rocastle and Balogun. Charles, as a lifelong fan and supporter, are you going the Bergkamp route? Someone older than that? Henry? Muller? What are we doing?
No, it's Bergkamp, hands down. It's Dennis Bergkamp. It's the greatest player I've ever seen. Had the privilege of being sat in Highbury for pretty much every game he played, and he was just an absolute magician. I loved Henry. Who wouldn't? I think Henry's probably. It's weird. I always kind of compare them and say Henry's the best player I've ever seen, but Bergkamp's the greatest player I've ever seen, which is weird because it kind of sounds like the same thing, but. Henry was that get you off your feet, unbelievable. Like, my God, what's he just done? He's just skinned the whole team. But Bergkamp watching it was just an artist, and the things he did, and it was just brilliant. And it was a pleasure to watch it. And the fact he stayed till he retired. He basically was there before Wenger, saw it all through, all the title wins under Wenger, everything, and then left retired at Arsenal. Is just, the greatest.
Daniel wants to know when I'm coming on TGT next week. I'm sure he was asking me. But,
Well, all of us are, aren't we?
actually, I think we all are. Actually,
Is that next week?
I think it might be. Yeah, it might be.
We should just have Charles come on with us.
Yeah, we have a special guest to join us today. So, yeah. Oh, anyone? Owen, Andy, best favorite Arsenal player?
Right.
I mean, Owen, it's got to be what, David O'Leary or Liam
No,
Brady?
favorite Arsenal players. Oh, this is going to sound so stupid, all right? And I've got photographs to prove this one. Obviously, my favorite was Thierry Henry, but growing up, I had a thing for Jose Antonio Reyes. I'm not sure if the live chat realised this, but I'm blessed with much more youth than these other three guys on here. So I was quite young at that stage, and I don't know why he was. I took a real shine into Jose Antonio Reyes growing up. But
nice to get an answer off the beaten path. You know, I mean, it's not embarrassing to say it's not embarrassing to say Henry or Bergkamp by any stretch, but I love hearing the ones that you wouldn't normally expect because
I love Reyes. I love Reyes. Reyes was brilliant.
He was like one of the short list players where I wish his career had continued on the trajectory that it did when he first joined us. He just lit up Highbury. I mean,
he did.
That Invincible run, there were matches where he ascended, like that Middlesbrough match where we were down 3-0.
It's one of my favourite ever Highbury moments, that Reyes goal in that game.
Yeah.
The noise when that went in.
I mean, the commentator was still like talking about the first goal that went in, and then he just, I mean, yeah. He was sublime. Mine's going to be Ian Wright every time.
Oh, I was guaranteed. I thought it was David Seaman because you're a goaltender. You're a goaltender. Anyway, Charles, I hope this isn't the last time you join us, but I would understand if it is.
No, not at all. It's been lots of fun.
Quick plug for tomorrow. We're doing back-to-back shows. Tomorrow we're going to have on Stephen Goff, who is on Twitter at and I know we're going to get flack for this, but at Soccer Insider. It's not his fault. It's called Soccer over here, and he is my local paper's football and sports genius when it comes to DC United. And obviously, this is an Arsenal podcast, but I got to take advantage of any time Arsenal and DC United are being discussed in the same breath, and that same breath is Mesut Ozil breath. But fortunately, that hasn't been resolved. So the podcast tomorrow will still have some relevance. We'll be talking to him at the beginning of the pod, again at 8 p.m. UK, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Then we'll be moving on and talking about the FA Cup round 3 game that we have on Saturday and hoping that goes well. So that's all I got for today. Anything else going on with that anyone else wants to plug? And of course, Charles, let us know where we can find you. Any articles that are coming up that we should be keeping our eyes open for?
Just the usual, I'd say at the moment. Obviously, Banks slap bang in the middle of the transfer window, so if anything happens, it will be on goal, which you can find on all my links on Twitter or on my YouTube channel on Facebook as well. But yeah, no, nothing groundbreaking coming out recently. Did a nice interview with Daniel Ballard today, who young kid, he's at Blackpool. It's well worth a read just for his story. Really, it's a pretty remarkable story how he's still there. He's twice told he was being released at Arsenal, but he battled back both times, and now he's doing really well for Northern Ireland. Had a really good start to the season internationally this year. Obviously, on loan at Blackpool, just had that extended to the end of the season, and decent young talent coming through. And yeah, it's worth reading that interview just for it's just his sort of mental side of things, what he's had to deal with, and the way he's battled back to keep his dream alive at Arsenal. Really, sometimes
those interviews are far more fascinating than the interviews with the people who you know everything about because they're out there all the time. I mean, the guys like that, we're hoping to have on, some ex-Arsenal Academy players in the next few months. One of whom plays at Sutton United, my second club, if you will. But lots of compliments for you, Sam. Charles has always been good to us, and by always I mean since we met about 6 months ago. And big supporter of our charity, and we really appreciate that. So we've really enjoyed having you on, Charles, and sharing your wisdom and experiences with us. And
thank you for having me. It's been lots of fun.
Well, please don't be a stranger, and we will be back tomorrow night, 8 p.m. UK time. Come on, you Gooners.